Alright everyone, it's time for day 3 of the midterm fallout. Of course, it's been quite a wild ride so far, but things right now are kind of stagnated because there are multiple states. First, there are multiple House races that are too close to call. This, by the way, is not evidence of fortification in action because much of it is happening in states that aren't fortified. So the Republicans can't really complain about not winning more House seats. There are enough outstanding still that haven't been called that the Republicans only need like 1 in 3 of them in order to at least narrowly take the House. I think that still happens. Now it just, you have to look at the differential of how many seats they get. Are they leading by 3 or 4, or is it, 10 or 11 or something like that? Probably somewhere in the middle. Gives them the votes needed to block Biden's larger budgets without negotiation. And the Senate is also still technically in play. Of course, the Nevada race hasn't been called. Laxalt does maintain a lead over his opponent with almost 90% counted. I think that one may end up going GOP. And of course, as predicted, Herschel Walker and Warnock will be going to runoff. Neither of them got 50% of the vote. In the end, Walker's very slightly ahead. He has a slight advantage going in, I think, to the runoff election. As long as the Republicans coalesce and don't get distracted by what they're being distracted by right now, which is Trump had a bad night, DeSantis is now the heir apparent, and shit like that. I'd like to point out something that's happening right now. You have, as usual, a wall of astroturfing and propaganda blaming Trump mainly and MAGA in general for the weak showing for the GOP. Despite the fact that a lot of it seems to have been systemic overpolling, except oddly enough in Texas, Florida, and a handful of other places. The Republicans did outperform in New York, of course. The polling deviates heavily from reality throughout most of the country. Nothing makes sense right now. And you still have the bullshit going on in Maricopa County, Nevada, and other states. I would like to point out that there are 3 GOP leaders, though, that are more centrally to blame for what you're seeing right now than Trump ever could be. Of course, he endorsed hundreds of people for running. The majority of them actually won. And certainly in the primaries, he was fucking at 85-90%. A significant proportion of those individuals did go on to win. Although, to be clear, some of them were in non-competitive races. Just to be clear, Trump fans, you do have to be honest about that. You endorse someone who's 20 points ahead, yeah, no shit, it ends up being a win for you at the state level or something. Several governors, people in the Senate, House, also state level races, mayors and stuff. Trump did a broad endorsement slew. I would note that DeSantis, other than stumping for Zeldin, I don't know, Lee Zeldin managed to lose by a margin larger than he was polling at, and DeSantis had actually gone there to campaign for him. But remember that DeSantis is the one that won the midterms. This is the astroturf you're getting from the left because they want a messy GOP primary. Really, the problem is threefold. First and foremost, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell took money that should have been earmarked for races like in Nevada, certainly in Arizona, where Kari Lake still does have a chance, by the way, to win that position. Blake Masters is further behind. It's iffy as to whether he can make up the difference. It would be difficult for him to do that, although it is possible. I'm not counting on Masters to make it at this point. Kari Lake, it's a 50-50 sum game, and you still got quite a few votes to tally, and they're not all mail-in ballots, honk honk. Mitch McConnell diverted millions of dollars of fundraising money from races that should have been targeted, like those, which right now Laxalt would be an extra point ahead. He'd be a shoo-in for that Nevada Senate seat had he gotten more support. You could have propped up Mastriano, although based on the polling, it would have been a waste of time. I was correct about that race, too. Fuck, you could have gone into New Hampshire, and you could feasibly have had a way forward to get rid of Hassan. That would have been a major fucking pickup, a major fucking shakeup. You could have targeted a half a dozen vulnerable House seats, and right now the GOP already would have clinched the majority there, and you wouldn't have to sit there for several more days fucking worrying about this. Instead, what did he use the money on? A GOP v. GOP race in Alaska. He convinced the RNC to divert money to a race in which the Republican necessarily wins because he wanted to prop up Murkowski against evil Shabaka. By the way, I don't think we have full results for there either. That's still in play, although last count I think Shabaka was up slightly. Sarah Palin v. Peltola, a little bit of a different story because the other challenger refused to drop. Next, you have Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, a long-term McCain ally. So these are all neocons we're talking about right now. Lindsey Graham putting forth, and I talked about it at the time, Republicans that were wise at the time, independents like myself, all basically looked at it and said the same thing, which is who has dirt on Lindsey Graham, other than the McCain family, of course, who is causing him to put forth a national abortion ban onto the table. It was so beyond the pale and such poor timing that even Mitch McConnell goddamn tabled it. Even he wasn't crazy enough. He probably thought it would negatively impact some of his allies that were running for Congress or gubernatorial positions. He's like, well, I know that this will do damage to MAGA, and that's a great thing, but it's also going to harm some of my allies that are running for re-election. Shut up, Lindsey Graham, please. Now's not the time. The GOP, at large as well, under McCarthy especially, chose to do two things that were terrible ideas. Number one was going along with Graham. A lot of the candidates got distracted by that and said, oh yeah, if we win, we're going to get rid of abortion in this country. You took an issue on which the Dems had overstretched. They had literally handed you victory on this issue with Northam shit, with their own national proposal, which was open-ended, and it was even criticized by some liberals in the legacy media at the time. Hey, look, you're gonna peeve off the independent voters. The average American wants abortion legal, but they don't want abortion in the third trimester. The Dems took that issue, and they had enough rope to strangle themselves with. They had the noose around their neck. And the GOP held the other side of the rope. And instead of giving a little tug or a nice big yank, they tied off their own noose, put it around their own necks and said, yeah, well, we're going to ban abortion if we're elected. Yeah, you took an issue on which the Dems had badly overstretched and were losing support, and you decided to counterbalance it, giving the far left a reason to turn out in urban areas, even in red states. Yeah, that was totally Trump's idea. He was the one that initially, he's Lindsey Graham now. He crawled inside of Lindsey Graham's flesh suit to deliver that particular fucking sermon. Third, McCarthy, of course, in the House. Why are there so many House races right now still out in left field that we don't know the results for? It's because you tactically blundered. You chose to go and try to prop up relatively safe races at the expense of ones that are now close, simply because the candidates were too MAGA. They're weak candidates. And that's the other AstroTurf we're seeing. Other than DRUMPF had a bad night, DeSantis wins, just ignore that Lee Zeldin rally, of course. Just ignore the fact that the bants between the two of them have been AstroTurf now for the better part of a goddamn year, just to be clear. Ignore all of that. It's Trump's fault. But it's also the fault of weak candidates. We need better candidate quality. That's an AstroTurf term that they're using. If we had had better candidates, everything would be fine. Basically, if you only nominated more Jeb Bushes and more Marco Rubios, this wouldn't have happened. If you took a step back and decided not to push forth any actual platforms of note, if you decided to cuck on guns and on budgeting and on UBI and everything else, basically if you give the Democrats everything they want and you just water it down slightly, so you basically go Joe Manchin mode in reverse, we would have won the day. Let me tell you this as a non-Republican. If the GOP is nuts enough to pull back on the populistic platforms that actually work, especially economically, going all in on guns, defending the Second Amendment, etc., defending the First Amendment, actually saying something about big tech, actually being willing to question what the fuck is happening in Arizona even right now, and they withdraw, and they go back to being the party of Bush and McCain, etc., not one of us will vote for them. Yeah, go ahead. Lose every independent voter that you stole from the Democrats. Lose every left independent voter that decided to hold their nose to vote for the GOP platform because they saw the Dems overstretching and making poor financial decisions. Go a fucking ahead and do that. Watch as people like me magically get rebranded as newfound liberals for deciding to abandon any hope that the Republican Party will actually get its act together. Go a fucking ahead and do that. Enjoy the outcome. You want a supermajority Dem in Congress? You'll probably end up having it. Because what's the point of voting between... It's like a microcosm of the 2012 election. I said this at the time. Obama v. Romney. What the goddamn hell is the difference? There is none. This is exactly why MAGA became a thing in the first place, the dysfunction of the uniparty system and its incapability of governing properly and not pissing off large swaths of the population because they stood for the same goddamn thing, and so people were perpetually kicking out non-incumbents anyway, leading to a stratification within Congress especially, is why you got MAGA. It's why people were pissed off enough to say, you know what, fuck it, I'm voting for Donald Trump because at least it sounds like he might try. And try he did, and had some very good successes, by the way, in the process. Then, of course, certain people in the world decided to lab leak a virus, and it was very, very coincidental timing, and, you know, there were U.S. companies involved with the funding, but we won't get into that because we're probably not allowed to elaborate too much. The fact is this. Donald Trump is responsible for the successes of the Republican Party. Look at the candidates he actually endorsed, and not just the big name races, but the broader slew of races in which he made an endorsement. Tell me he had a bad night. He didn't have a bad night. There were certain Republicans that outperformed. Ron DeSantis is one of them. Congrats, you won by almost 20 fucking points. You were up by 11 in the polls. How this comports to the reality in the rest of the country is anyone's guess. You've got possibly Laxalt winning. You've got multiple others, Johnson, of course, keeping his position. You have the possibility of Chewbacca winning. You have numerous House seats in which there were wins. Flores is down for the count. Last I checked, Boebert's still a bit behind with almost all the votes counted. She may be able to make it, but no, we don't know. Marjorie Taylor Greene soared to re-election. Yes, Trump had a bad night. It's not Mitch McConnell's poor decision-making. It's not his fault. It's not the uniparty system in general. It's not the strategic blunders by people like Graham and McCarthy. It's not the dysfunction of the RNC. It's not literally abandoning or ignoring your own candidates that's the problem. The RNC effectively ignored dozens of House candidates during this election. No shit, those people lost. No shit, you decided to waste millions of dollars propping up a Republican running against another Republican at the expense of these other races. It's Trump's fault. I guess the idea is that Donald Trump had to sell a couple of his skyscrapers, liquidate 50 million quick ones, and fund the races himself as though he is his own goddamn political party. The man's not even in office. Stop whining about it. When I hear Republicans whining about fortification with some of these House seats, I can only shake my head. They're not fortified. Likewise, when they turn around and say, well, it's actually Trump's fault. We need better candidate quality. What the hell are you talking about? That doesn't comport to reality in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't Donald Trump that decided to ignore Laxalt or Blake Masters. He was trying to single-handedly prop these people up while the RNC goddamn abandoned them. If the red wave turned into a red trickle, blame Mitch the bitch McConnell, who I never liked and no reasonable person does, by the way, including most Republicans. McCarthy, who's not liked even within his own party generally, and Lindsey fucking Graham, the big three. Along with many others, of course. That's about all. Peace out.